Section 4. The Last Days and the Present Days. When Jesus was speaking to Peter of his fate, Peter asked him about John's future. Jesus replied, "If it is my will that he remain until I come, what is that to you?" Upon hearing this, the disciples thought Jesus would return during John's lifetime. Moreover, Jesus said to his disciples, "You will not have gone through all the towns of Israel before the Son of Man comes. And, truly, I say to you, there are some standing here who will not taste death before they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom." Based on these sayings, the disciples and many Christians since have believed that Jesus would return during their lifetime. They have been constantly haunted by a sense of urgency that the last days are at hand. This is because they fail to grasp the fundamental meaning of the last days. We can deduce that today is, in fact, the last days by examining the various circumstances of the present age. We can recognize in these circumstances the restoration of the three great blessings which God has purposed in his providence of restoration. As Jesus said, "From the fig tree learn its lesson. As soon as its branch become tender and put forth its leaves, you know that summer is near. So also, when you see all these things, you know that he is near at the very gates." 4.1. Signs of the restoration of the first blessing. The first blessing God gave to Adam and Eve was perfection of individual character. In the modern world, there are various phenomena which indicate that God's providence to restore fallen people to their original state as perfected individuals is near its zenith. First, we can observe that the spirituality of fallen people is being restored. We have already explained that when a person reaches perfection, he becomes completely one with God in heart and is able to build true relationships with others. Adam and Eve, though not quite perfect, were able to converse with God. When they fell from this state, they caused their descendants also to sink into ignorance of and insensitivity to God. Gradually, the spirituality of fallen people has been rehabilitated as they enjoy the merit of the age in the providence of restoration. In the last days, therefore, many faithful believers will acquire the ability to communicate with God, as was prophesied in the Bible. "In the last days, I will pour out my spirit upon all flesh, and your sons and your daughters shall prophesy, and your young men shall see visions, and your old men shall dream dreams." Acts 2:17. As we witness a profusion of spiritual phenomena taking place all around us, we can discern that the present era is the last days. We are entering an era when we can reach individual perfection and restore the first blessing of God. A second sign that the first blessing is being restored in the present era can be seen in the historical trend toward the recovery of the freedom of the original mind. Due to the fall, our original mind was shackled under the yoke of Satan, and we lost the freedom to come before God. In the present era, as people struggle for freedom at the cost of their lives, the zeal to gain true freedom has reached its height. That is an indication that we are now entering a new era in which we can attain individual perfection, long denied by Satan, and freely go before God. A third sign of the renewal of the first blessing is the restoration of true human value. From the horizontal perspective, every person possesses equal value, but that does not do justice to his true worth. From the vertical perspective of heaven, each individual possesses the loftiest cosmic value. Human beings lost their original value because of the fall. In the present era, as democratic ideals have flourished, people have been promoting the emancipation of slaves, the freedom of oppressed racial minorities, and the independence of small and weak nations. They are advocating human rights and equality between the sexes and among people. More than ever before, people are zealously uplifting the value of the individual toward its original value. This demonstrates that we have arrived at the threshold of the last days, when fallen people can restore the first blessing of God. A fourth sign that the first blessing is being renewed is the present age is the restoration of original true love in fallen people. The world, which has realized the ideal of God, will be in the image of a perfected individual. Every person in that world is united with God vertically, and this forms the basis upon which they can naturally live in harmony with each other horizontally. Solidarity and empathy are attained only when people can join together in the love of God. Due to the fall, the vertical bond of love between God and people was broken, and this in turn caused the horizontal love among them to be severed. As a result, human history became one of perpetual conflict. In the present era, however, the philosophy of universal love has become widespread, and people are increasingly seeking for true original love. This is more evidence that the present time is the eve of the last days, when we can restore God's first blessing and reach perfection of individual character grounded in the love of God. 4.2 Signs of the restoration of the second blessing. God's second blessing was for Adam and Eve to attain true parenthood and bear and raise good children, forming a family, society, and world where goodness reigns. However, Adam and Eve fell and became evil parents, multiplying evil children. The descendants, all humanity, formed a world oppressed by evil. Ever since, God has been conducting a twofold providence, internal and external, to restore the sovereignty of goodness. God has founded religions and worked through them to elevate people's spirituality by internally purifying people of satanic elements. At the same time, God has been cutting off Satan's influence externally through conflicts and wars. By separating Satan both internally and externally, the providence of restoration has been raising up good children who will one day be able to serve Christ when he comes as the true parent. In this way, human history has been paving the way for the restoration of God's second blessing. Accordingly, we can deduce that the present era is the last days by examining the signs of the internal and external restoration of God's sovereignty. These are manifested as trends in the history of the development of cultural spheres and in the history of the rise and fall of nations, both of which are rooted in religion. First, let us investigate how the history of the development of cultural spheres has progressed to the point when, in the present era, we have arrived at the threshold of the last days. God sends prophets and saints to fallen humanity to found religions. He works to develop them to the original minds of those who seek the good. In this way, God builds up cultural spheres based upon religions. Although many cultural spheres have emerged in the course of history, with the passage of time, most of them either merged with or were absorbed by others. In the present age, we see a clear trend toward the formation of one global cultural sphere based on Christian ideals. As this trend progresses, all races and peoples are increasingly coming to stand side by side as brothers and sisters under the love and guidance of Jesus Christ, therefore restoring the second blessing of God. The main distinction between Christianity and other religions is that its purpose is to receive and honor the true parents of humanity, through whom all people can be reborn as good children. In this way, Christianity should renew the world as the one global family which God purposed from the time of creation. This makes Christianity the central religion with the mission to fulfill the goal of the providence of restoration. In the present era, the world has been coalescing into one cultural sphere based on Christian ideals. As the world has been greatly influenced by the teachings of Jesus and the Holy Spirit, who are the true parents of humankind, the way has been opened for all people to become godly children. This trend is evidence that God's second blessing is being restored. Thus, we can conclude with certainty that the present age is the last days. Next, let us investigate how the history of the rise and fall of nations has been progressing toward the goal of restoring the sovereignty of good, thereby leading us into the last days. It is an error brought about by ignorance of the fundamental providence of God to regard the cause of struggles and wars as mere conflicts of interest and contests between ideologies. Humankind has suffered through a sinful history ever since the first human ancestors fell under the subjugation of Satan. However, as long as God's purpose of creation still stands, the purpose of his history must be to cut out ties with Satan and restore God's kingdom. If there were no wars or divisions in this fallen world, then the sovereignty of evil would continue forever and the world would never be restored. Therefore, God has worked his providence to restore the heavenly sovereignty by degrees. He sends prophets and saints to the fallen world to found religions and raise the level of morality. He establishes governments with higher standards of goodness, which come to oppose and destroy regimes with lower standards of goodness. To fulfill the providence of restoration, therefore, conflicts and wars are unavoidable. To summarize, some of these issues, many of which will be treated more thoroughly in Part 2, human history has progressed through the providential course of restoration through indemnity. Although there have been times when evil seemed to prevail, in the end, the relatively evil social and political forces declined and were absorbed by the more godly forces. The wars which have shaped the rise and fall of nations are thus unavoidable during the course of the providence to re-establish the reign of good. For example, in the Bible, God ordered the Israelites to destroy the 7 tribes of Canaan. When Saul disobeyed him, leaving some of the Amalekites alive to their cattle, God severely punished him. While on the occasion God commanded the Israelites to destroy the Gentiles, at another time when the Israelites of the northern kingdom turned to evil, God delivered them into the hands of the Assyrians. We must understand that God's only intention by these events was to obliterate the sovereignty of evil and restore the sovereignty of God. Therefore, fights between individuals within the same good sovereignty on the side of God are evil, because they can weaken and even cause the disintegration of the good sovereignty itself. On the other hand, wars conducted by a good sovereignty to destroy an evil sovereignty are good in that they further the fulfillment of the providence of restoration. The history of conflicts among nations has served the purpose of cutting off Satan's ties to humankind. History has progressed to the point where God's side can now reclaim territories and wealth all over the world. The providence to reclaim people began from lone individuals called by God. God's foundation progressively expanded to families, societies, and nations, and today has reached the world level. The providence to separate Satan began with the clan society and continued through stages of political and social development, feudalism, monarchy, and today democracy. At present, our world is divided into 2. The democratic world, which seeks to create societies on God's side, and the communist world, which has been establishing regimes on Satan's side. In other words, although fallen human history began under the sovereignty of Satan, God's providence has brought about a progressive transformation of the hearts of people and has nurtured their original nature, which seeks goodness through religion, philosophy, and ethics. This inner nurturing has inspired groups which seek a just rule to separate from the prevailing evil. This process of separation has culminated in the establishment of 2 opposing powers on the global level. These 2 sovereignties, with contrary purposes, can by no means peacefully coexist. As human history nears its consummation, they will surely arrive at the point of intersection, colliding internally in the realm of ideology. This inner conflict may spur them to fight external wars with military forces. At the conclusion of this conflict, Satan's sovereignty will perish forever, and heaven's sovereignty will be re-established as the one eternal sovereignty of God. Today, we are at this point of intersection, when these two worlds are confronting each other in the final battle. This is yet more evidence that the last days is the present era. The flow of human history, in which good and evil are gradually separated, may be compared to muddy water. When muddy water is flowing slowly, the mud sinks to the bottom, while the clear water rises to the top, until eventually the mud and water are completely separated. Human history is similar. With the passage of time, the evil sovereignty slowly sinks to destruction, while the good sovereignty gradually ascends on the path to prosperity. After these two sovereignties intersect near the end of history, the good sovereignty will remain as God's eternal kingdom, while the evil sovereignty will perish in eternal darkness. The era when the paths of these good and evil sovereignties intersect is the last days. This is also the time when Adam and Eve's fall from the top of the growth stage will be restored through indemnity. All people in this era will suffer through great ideological confusion, much as the first human ancestors at the point of the temptation were utterly confused as to whom they should obey and what should guide their actions. During the course of the providence of restoration, there were several occurrences of the last days when the good and evil sovereignties came to the point of intersection. The times of Noah and Jesus, as mentioned earlier, were also the last days. Hence, they too were times when the two sovereignties intersected. Yet, because people failed to accomplish their portion of responsibility, God's efforts to destroy the evil sovereignty were frustrated, and he had to begin once again the providence to separate good from evil. At the time of Jesus' return, the two sovereignties will intersect once more. The course of the providence progresses in a spiral path, moving forward in pursuit of the purpose of creation, while events periodically repeat themselves in a circular fashion. Consequently, history has repeated itself, producing parallel periods. 4.3. Signs of the restoration of the third blessing. Once Adam and Eve had attained perfection, they were to fulfill God's third blessing by gaining dominion over the natural world. Dominion over the natural world has two aspects: internal and external. Both these aspects of dominion were lost to humankind at the fall, but we witness their restoration in the present era. This also suggests that the present era is the last days. Internal dominion denotes dominion of the heart. A person who reaches perfection and comes fully to resonate with God in heart will experience God's heart as his own reality. Hence, he will be able to love the creation with the same love as that which emanates from God's heart and appreciate its beauty with the same delight as God. This is the meaning of dominion of the heart. However, when human beings fell and could no longer experience God's heart as the reality, they also could no longer relate to the creation with the same love as that which flows from God's heart. God's providence of restoration through religion, philosophy, ethics, and so forth has gradually elevated the spirituality of fallen people toward God. In the modern world, there is evidence that people are regaining the worthiness to govern the creation through heart. External dominion denotes proper mastery of the creation through science and technology. Had our first ancestors reached perfection and attained eternal dominion over the creation, able to love it with the same heart as God, then their sensibility to the spiritual dimension of creation would have developed to the highest degree. This would have stimulated the rapid advancement of science, giving them external dominion over everything in the natural world. Humankind would have reached the stars long ago and harnessed the full potential of the universe. Economic progress would have accompanied the development of science and technology, creating a comfortable and pleasant living environment. However, due to the fall, people's spirituality declined, and they lost internal dominion over the natural world. Their spiritual sensibility became as dull as those of animals, and they descended to the level of primitive man. Consequently, they also lost external dominion over the natural world. Through God's providence of restoration, people's spirituality is being elevated and their internal dominion over the creation is being restored. As a result, their external dominion is also being renewed, leading to today's highly advanced science. Modern people have built an extremely comfortable and pleasant living environment through the economic progress that has accompanied scientific development. Fallen people have thus been restoring their dominion over the universe, advancing toward the re-establishment of God's third blessing. Observing this, we are assured that the present era is the last days. To summarize, the world's cultural spheres are converging toward one global cultural sphere based on one religion. Concurrently, nations are moving toward forming an apparatus for international governance, having progressed from the League of Nations to the United Nations. Today, people are envisioning plans for a world government. In the sphere of economics, the world is moving in the direction of establishing one international market. Highly developed transportation and communication technology have overcome the separation of time and space. People today can travel and communicate with each other almost as if they were living in the same village. People of all races, from east and west, can meet with one another as easily as if they were members of a large family. People on all 6 continents are crossing the ocean seeking friendship and brotherly love. However, a family can be formed only when there is a father and a mother. Only then can true brotherly love arise. Only when Christ comes again as a parent of humanity will all people join together in one great family and live harmoniously in the global village. As these events unfold, we may know that today is surely the last days. There is yet one final gift that human must present to humanity. It is the cosmic teaching which can bind together all the strangers of the global village into one family through the love and guidance of the same parents.